deportation. Number 2, state and local law enforcement must agree to turn over all illegal aliens arrested by local police. And 3, local police must assist federal law enforcement in apprehending and detaining illegal aliens who are wanted for crimes, meaning effectively they're going after the criminals. If you've come into this country illegally and then proceeded to, in addition to violating border laws, violating other laws, drunk driving, murder, rape, assault, whatever it may be, they want you out of this country. And Trump is effectively saying that local law enforcement has not been allowed to cooperate with federal authorities when they arrest an illegal alien for any of these crimes. And effectively, the local governments have been protecting criminals from being deported. And there's even been a lot of cases, which he's not discussing here, where judges have even downgraded the crimes of illegal aliens, making lower punishments for crimes because they're illegal aliens in order to protect them from deportation. Trump is saying basically no more of that. What this is doing effectively is undermining rule of law in the United States and subjecting American citizens to abuse by foreign nationals. And then he says this: Democrat politicians must partner with the federal government to protect American citizens and the rapid removal of all criminal illegal aliens in our country. He says some Democrats in places like Memphis, Tennessee, or Washington, D.C. have done so, resulting in safer streets for all, which is true, by the way. If you look at crime statistics, for example, in Washington, D.C., where Trump federalized law enforcement to an extent, D.C. is a special case in terms of American law. You actually saw a huge plunge in crime when they began doing this. And then Trump adds, effectively, in addition, I'm hereby calling on the United States Congress to immediately pass legislation to end sanctuary cities, which is the root cause of all these problems. He says American cities should be safe sanctuaries for law-abiding American citizens only, not illegal alien criminals who broke our nation's laws. Now, what are the chances that basically Democrats are going to vote with Republicans and, with a filibuster in place and end sanctuary cities and sanctuary states across the entire country? In my personal opinion, next to zero, frankly. One of the hard realities, the issue of mass migration is one of the top issues that's going to be effectively on the ballots, especially come the midterms. Democrats are even threatening to shut down the government right now in terms of the new spending bill in order to get their bid to defund ICE. They want to have the budget for ICE stripped away. Are they going to vote then to have illegal aliens basically deported to allow ICE to do its job? The chances of that are slim to none. But on that point, there is something else at play, which is what Trump is laying out here is something entirely different. What Trump is suggesting in his laying out of how the whole thing happened, his laying out of effectively what's going on, he's kind of threatening local officials. He's actually threatening officials and suggesting that what they're doing is an intentional undermining of American law, that there was a grand conspiracy in place to, again, open the borders, allow for mass migration, facilitate it, fund it, subsidize it, free houses, free hotels, free food, mass programs allowing for the massive defrauding of American citizens, tens of billions of dollars in fraud, whistleblowers punished, all of this covered up, feeding into a massive welfare system and also to a big voter system as well. He's suggesting this is part of a grand conspiracy and that maybe even local officials have been involved in this conspiracy. Now, after making this statement, Trump then announced that he's sending in the big guns. And here's what he said. He said, I'm sending Tom Homan to Minnesota tonight. That's border czar Tom Homan. He says, he has not been involved in that area, but knows and likes many of the people there. Tom is tough but fair and will report directly to me. Trump suggesting again that he's kind of getting his own guy on the ground and acting as his eyes and ears on the ground is going to allow Trump to more directly enforce the policies he believes need to be enforced in the area. It seems that Trump's call is actually showing some effect. Recalling Governor Tim Walz and others, look, start handing over the criminals. We're investigating you. for potential fraud and involved in a massive system for fraud. And where Trump is saying, Trump is suggesting, it seems, that the acts to block law enforcement, the acts to interfere with it, the acts to organize riots and protests, Trump is suggesting this is not really just about the illegal immigrants. He's suggesting this is an act to prevent investigations into fraud. And he's also looping in, or kind of bringing in, local elected officials as being part of that investigation, suggesting they may be part of a racket, a criminal racket. Now, Trump said on Truth Social that Governor Tim Walz called me with the request to work together with respect to Minnesota. He says, a very good call, and we actually seem to be on similar wavelengths. Lo and behold, right? Now, keep in mind, this was right after Governor Tim Walz had announced that he had activated the National Guard. Now, you might ask, well, geez, a local governor activating the National Guard, would that not be him already cooperating with Trump? Not really. Why is that? Governor Tim Walz did not activate the National Guard to cooperate with ICE. Governor Tim Walz activated the National Guard to cooperate with the local sheriffs. The local sheriff is pretty much in the same camp as Governor Walz. And so it was more to protect his kind of interpretation of the law. Many would suggest, well, look, the sheriff doesn't answer to the governor. They're of the same political mindset. That's the reality of it. And so they're not really working with federal authorities. They're doing the opposite. What Trump is now suggesting is that Governor Tim Walz is now cooperating, at least just saying he will. We'll have to see where it goes, cooperating with Trump on this. And Trump said this, I told Governor Walz that I would have Tom Homan call him, again, border czar, and that what we are looking for are any and all criminals that they have in their possession. And remember, preventing criminals from facing justice is what? A violation of the law. And Tom Homan says, look, these local officials are saying, I'm willing to go to jail to protect these people from deportation. Tom Homan says, well, good. I'm willing to put you in jail for protecting these people from deportation. Remember also, Governor Tim Walz and other elected officials have already now been handed subpoenas. They are currently under criminal investigation. That's why this matters so much. Why does it also matter when you're being investigated for, let's say, I don't know, protecting criminals from being deported or blocking local law enforcement, which is the main accusation they're facing here? Why does that matter? When you're investigated criminally, the findings of potential crimes are not limited to the scope of the initial investigation. In fact, this is one of the reasons why oftentimes people say that sometimes the investigation is the punishment in itself. If you're under criminal investigation, it means you have to hand over your communications, you have to hand over your financial data, you have to hand over your books, you have to reveal your communications with other people who may themselves also then become the subject of investigation. Effectively, you become an open book, and everything is then readable. When you're under criminal investigation, even if it's for a minor crime, sometimes the investigations expand. Sometimes the investigations expand to others you've been talking to. And when they get under investigation, it may turn out that their finances then reveal things about you or your friends or anybody else. An investigation is not limited to the mere scope of the initial intent. Oftentimes it expands, not just to you, but to everybody around you, and to sometimes an entire establishment. What Trump has been alleging is that we're watching in Minnesota, and Minneapolis overall, is massive fraud, protecting of criminals against deportation, blocking of local law enforcement, and remember Trump's previous allegations, possible foreign involvement, including maybe underhanded deals with China. That has been one of Trump's big allegations here. Maybe involvement in the foreign funding of terrorist organizations like Al-Shabaab, the Somalian terrorist organization. Maybe, for example, silencing of whistleblowers, warning that local welfare was going in massive amounts of fraud to Al-Shabaab, and that people were being punished for trying to prevent that from happening, or warning about it. Meaning, a giant criminal racket which extends even to the halls of the local government. An investigation, and people have already been handed subpoenas, is a very, very, very big deal. And it could get even worse if it turns out that the mass protests and riots you're now watching, which we'll get into a bit because they're not grassroots, they're actually highly organized. I'll get into the organization not being revealed on that in just a bit. That if there's political involvement in that, then that could be also an act of racketeering, an act of actual, what you would call an attempt to maybe overthrow the government, an actual case of, insurgency, an actual case of an attempt to split off from the United States. This could be a massive, massive, massive crime. Now, will it go to that extent? We'll have to see. But here's what Trump says. He says the governor very respectfully understood that, and I will be speaking to him in the near future. He was happy that Tom Homan was going to Minnesota, and so am I. He says, we have had such tremendous success in Washington, D.C., Memphis, Tennessee, in New Orleans, Louisiana, and virtually every other place that we have, quote-unquote, touched. And even in Minnesota, crime is way down, but both Governor Walz and I want to make it better. President Donald J. Trump. Now, look, on the other side of this, something else is happening. Though Trump is facing some strong pushback from Democrats. Former President Barack Obama is kind of front and center with this. I'll be going into this and also leaked communications. All this after we come back from a quick break. Against sanctuary cities and illegal immigrants and potential fraudsters all across the system. And he's even now sent border czar Tom Homan to Minnesota. But on the other side of this, Trump is actually facing a lot of pretty strong pushback from Democrats, the establishment media, global governments, and the entire system of NGOs and other secretive organizations pulling some of the strings with this, which we'll get into. And former President Barack Obama, well, he's laid out the narrative of that side in a big old public letter. And here's what Obama says. Obama says, the killing of Alex Preddy is a heartbreaking tragedy. It should also be a wake-up call to every American, regardless of party, that many of our core values as a nation are increasingly under assault. Now, who is this Alex Preddy? Alex Preddy was one of the protesters there. He was a former nurse. According to information now coming out, he apparently quit his job and then joined some organization organizing protests in Minneapolis and Minnesota. He had become part of an organization that was actively trying to block ICE. Alex Preddy also brought a gun, a handgun, one of those SIG guns that has a problem of discharging, by the way, brought it to a protest, which is a violation of a law. He also brandished his firearm in threat to ICE. Now, what happens if there are ICE agents and you pull a gun out? Well, they shoot you. Alex Preddy then got shot. Now, here's the problem with the story. Under normal circumstances, that would not be like a national scandal against ICE. It would be the other way. If a conservative went to a Democrat protest, brandished a gun, and police shot him, he'd probably get, the ICE agent or whoever else would probably get a presidential award. Obama probably would have awarded somebody, an official, if they killed a conservative. Guess what? That's what happened on January 6th when an unarmed woman named Ashley Babbitt was shot and murdered, unarmed, crawling through a window by an officer who got awarded a plot for killing an unarmed woman. But again, this is a political narrative, and not all political narratives are created equal. Alex Preddy brandished his firearm and then got shot. This is why it matters, though. They say he was shot execution style. He was on his knees, had the gun in his hand. The officer shot him. Why did he shoot him? They were wrestling, trying to get the gun out of his hands. The problem you have with that particular SIG variant, it has a problem. It discharges. There was at least one case of an American troop who had it, holstered. The gun went off and actually killed him. These guns have a really big problem. It's this particular model, and Alex Preddy's gun discharged. Now, what happens if you're at a protest and you brandish a firearm? and the gun goes off, whether you meant to shoot it or not. Well, the officer might think you're shooting at them, and they're going to shoot you. That's what happened. But Obama and others are making Alex Preddy into a martyr, suggesting this is another case of abuse and use of force. Look how evil ICE is for killing a guy who brandished a firearm threatening to kill them. Now, Obama says, quote, for weeks now, people across the country have been rightly outraged by the spectacle of masked ICE recruits and other federal agents acting with impunity and engaging in tactics that seem designed to intimidate, harass, provoke, and endanger the residents of a major American city. Effectively, what's happening? Well, ICE is doing its job. Why is ICE having trouble doing its job? Because a large-scale network of agitators are trying to block them. It's not grassroots, it's actually being organized. Who's it being organized by? We'll get into that in a bit. But it might in fact be tied to a network, a rainbow network, some might call them, tied in with many elected officials, including some making these kinds of statements, by the way. But Obama makes the big thing here, calling them masked ICE recruits, because that's the narrative going around in the media, in the establishment, and everywhere else. Masked individuals abducting people. What they're doing is carrying out normal forms of law enforcement, which under Obama was also normal. It's why they call them the deporter-in-chief, by the way. But Obama says this has to stop. He said, I would hope that after this most recent tragedy, administration officials will reconsider their approach and start finding ways to work constructively with Governor Walz and Mayor Frey, who, by the way, have both been handed criminal subpoenas now, as well as state and local police. Local police, state police, remember county is sheriff. Governor Walz activated the National Guard to cooperate with them against Trump, but this is what Obama says, as well as state and local police to avert more chaos and achieve legitimate law enforcement goals. Apparently, what Obama is referring to is not federal law enforcement, but local law enforcement. And the goals of local law enforcement is they're not allowed to cooperate with law enforcement at the federal level, and effectively are not allowed to engage in deportations, which is what Obama refers to as the legitimate law enforcement goals in this case, we believe. He says, quote, in the meantime, every American should support and draw inspiration from the wave of peaceful protests in Minneapolis and other parts of the country. What does Obama mean by this? Every American should support the protests in Minneapolis and other parts of the country, meaning you should get behind the people blocking ICE and then draw inspiration from them. Now, what does it mean? What's the difference between supporting something and becoming inspired by something? Well, support means that you support them in your heart. Being inspired by them means that it invokes a type of change within you. What is that change? It could be that you view them as heroes. It could mean that you view them as something that you admire. It could mean that they inspire you to act in similar ways. We don't really know what Obama's referring to here, but that's what he says, inspired. And Obama says, quote, they are a timely reminder that ultimately it's up to each of us as citizens to speak out against injustice, protect our basic freedoms, and hold our government accountable. Interesting, right? I'll get into why that matters so much in just a bit, because that could tie into some of the communications I've seen getting leaked. But on that point also, another key message from Democrats and local officials has been that the chaos will end if Trump just pulls back ICE enforcement. One of the big narratives against Trump right now is that the killing of Alex Preddy is his fault because Alex Preddy would not have brought a gun to a protest in violation of law and pulled it out and brandished it and then fired it if it were not for Trump trying to enforce border laws. And so they're suggesting that the chaos will end. People would not be protesting if Trump was not trying to enforce the law. And so the solution here is that Trump should stop enforcing the law. In other words, it puts the lotion on the skin or it gets the hose again. Just put the lotion on the skin and you won't get the hose. Come on. What are you thinking, America? Well, everyone, that's all for tonight. Thank you for joining us. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed.